All right, if you have your Bible with you or if you're using your smartphone, I want to encourage you to go ahead and turn to Mark chapter 5. Mark chapter 5. And if you want to, at some point today, turn to Luke chapter 8, not in the message, but afterwards, because there's another version of this story written by a different one of the apostles. And in Luke chapter 8, it gives us a little bit more detail. So, giving you both, okay? Got that? Are you going to stay awake today? Yes. You're too cold to go sleep, right? I just love mornings like this because I look out and I see who our hardy souls are, who's adventurous, who braves the cold, who drinks coffee. Yeah, you're pretty much my coffee drinking group, so thank you. Thank you for being here. I got Luke on the brain. Mark chapter 5, beginning in verse 1. We're going to read down through quite a bit of this story. It's a little bit longer passage than I would normally read to you, so it'll be on the screen as well, and I hope that you'll follow along with me. Beginning in chapter 5, verse 1. So this would be Jesus and his disciples, they arrived at the other side of the lake, in the region of the Gerasenes. Not exactly a vacation destination. You'll find out why here in just a moment. When Jesus climbed out of the boat, a man, by the way, do you understand why God gave you an imagination? He gave you an imagination so when you read things like this, you can picture it in your mind, okay? So you got the picture so far. Jesus, the disciples, they're in a boat. They've come across to what's called the region of the Gerasenes. All right? When Jesus climbed out of the boat, a man possessed by an evil spirit came from the tombs to meet him. We'll stop right there. When Teresa saw what this message was going to be about today, she couldn't believe it. That I was choosing a passage like this to preach about Christmas. Okay? Demon-possessed, breakdowns, meltdowns, all that, but I think it's perfect, all right? So stay with me here. This man lived in the burial caves and could no longer be restrained, even with a chain. Whenever he was put into chains and shackles, as he often was, he snapped the chains from his wrists and smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Day and night he wandered among the burial caves and in the hills, howling and cutting himself with sharp stones. Reminds you of shopping at Walmart at Christmas time, right? I'm just trying to keep it pertinent here. All right, when Jesus was still some distance away, the man saw him, ran to meet him, and bowed low before him. With a shriek, I'm not going to shriek this, okay? It says, with a shriek, he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had already said to the spirit, "Come out of the man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus demanded, "What is your name?" And he replied, "My name is Legion, because there are many of us inside this man." Makes you feel all warm and fuzzy at Christmas time, doesn't it? Yeah. Interesting. Then the spirits begged him again and again not to send them to some distant place. And that little phrase, distant place, doesn't mean a whole lot here, but if you look at the passage in Luke 8, you'll get more of an idea of what the demons were trying to avoid. Okay? Okay? Yeah. All right, good. You're still awake. Okay? There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. Now that should be a wake-up call for all of you that are Bible students, because what nationality did not eat pork at all? The Jews, okay? So we are outside of the Jewish influence. We're in a Gentile part of that region. The evil spirits begged him again and again not to send them to some distant place. There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. "Send us into those pigs," the spirits begged. "Let us enter them." How are you going to explain this in your Christmas story? Okay? So Jesus gave them permission. Isn't it nice of Jesus to say, okay, you want to go into those pigs? I'm going to let you go into those pigs. The evil spirits came out of the man and entered the pigs. And the entire herd of about 2,000 pigs plunged down the steep hillside into the lake and drowned in the water. This is a pretty bizarre story, isn't it? You don't expect anybody to be waltzing across the screen going, fa la 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 la. Okay. Now, we're going to jump to the end of the story, and I'll explain that more when we get to it. But in verse 18, we pick up the story. Jesus has healed the man, has restored him. And so now Jesus is getting ready to leave. Verse 18. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. But Jesus said, no. Go home to your family and tell them everything the Lord has done for you and how merciful he has been. So the man started off to visit the 10 towns of that region and began to proclaim the great things Jesus has done for him, and everyone was amazed at what he told them. And they all had a happy Merry Christmas. That's not in the text there. I just thought I would throw that to you. Now, again, you might think I'm a little strange, but you already do, don't you? But I think that story about the demon-possessed man somehow is very appropriate for this time of year. By the time the month of December is over, there is a part of all of us that understands what it means to go crazy. Oh, come on, tell the truth. There's something you're just not looking forward to over the next couple of weeks. Maybe it's a group of people that you're going to be with. Maybe it's an activity that you have to get involved with. But there's a part of us that cries out during this whole season for everything to slow down, for the madness to stop, for everything to just come down to a central point. We reach the point, let's be honest, where we don't want to shop for one more present, or wrap one more gift, or attend one more party, or, and this is the saddest one, we reach a point where we don't want to make one more batch of cookies, even though you haven't given any to the pastor yet. This is almost a maddening time of year. Now, don't get me wrong, we love Christmas. Christmas is beautiful, it's uplifting, it's something that we enjoy doing, and year after year, you're right, we find the strength to get through it. But the closer it gets, the more we understand those cartoons that you're going to start seeing in the papers. The mom who is jumping happily up and down on her Christmas tree. Or the department store Santa who on his way home snarls at a little bitty kid. We do understand that. If we're honest, we do. See, we have a basic problem that I call overload. Are you familiar with that word? It's good because we're all living proof that it actually happens. Not the least of which is during a season like this, we put way too much pressure on ourselves. In our mystery-starved technological world, we tend to, shock of shocks, we tend to overdo it for Christmas. We do. We really do. And then we pay the price for it. So you're going, well, what price do we pay for overdoing it? I'm so glad you asked, because that's the next part of our message. What price do we pay for overdoing it? It falls into two areas. Are you ready? The first one is, go ahead. You can put it up on the screen. Thank you. Distress. What is the root word of distress? Stress. Yes. We could just use the word stress. You would understand that. Doctors and psychiatrists have noted for years that problems always escalate at Christmas. Some people become physically ill from the stress that they go through during this season. Other people suffer from depression. The strain of all the excitement, coping with all the family drama, it just becomes too much. There is also a marked increase in suicides this time of year. And some people can't handle the difference between what they think Christmas should be and what it's actually turning out to be. And I would just say that it seems so sad to me that the birthday of the Prince of Peace should be the cause or be the occasion for such stress. But truth be known, this stress is only a symptom of a much larger problem. And I've already pointed it out to you. We simply have a tendency to overdo it. Do we need to have confession time where we just kind of had a group confession? Yeah, we have a tendency to overdo it. And when we overdo as much as we do, it will inevitably, eventually come crashing down on top of us. And a lot of us have experienced that. In a certain sense, and this is where you're going to want to check my sanity, I would say breakdowns are almost necessary. Stay with me. Not to the degree of the demon-possessed man in our text, but it becomes necessary in the sense that we all need those periods of time that will bring us back down to earth. As things get out of balance in our lives, we have to have time to restore our balance. Webster's dictionary defines a breakdown as the process of failing to continue. The process of failing to function. What are we saying? We get to this time of year and we just can't keep it up. We can't keep doing what we've been doing. And who among us really would want to keep up the pace the rest of the year that we put ourselves under in this month? All the activities, all the parties, all the things that we have going on, we wouldn't want to keep this up all year round. We have to come down sometimes. Something in us wonders during all of our Christmas confusion if the demon-possessed man didn't have things a little bit better than the townspeople did. I mean, think about the freedom this guy had. At least there were times when he could feel better about himself and just go around ranting and raving and telling everybody what he really thought and how he really felt. Isn't that something you would like to do at Christmas time once in a while? When the whole family pressure just gets so big, there's a part of you that just wants to let it out. And then other people would look at us and they would say, well, that's just who they are. Right? We honestly don't know much about this mysterious crazy man in our text. We have no idea what caused his breakdown. We have no idea what part of him fractured. What part of him allowed all those demons into his life? It wouldn't have been too much Christmas at that point. It might have been too much Hanukkah. And today is the start of Hanukkah, so happy Hanukkah for those of you that are... That was funny too. I thought it was funny. I don't know what it was that set him off. Maybe it was too many pressures at home. Maybe the pressures of married life or family life. Maybe troubles at work. I got to be honest, sometimes I am amazed that more of us aren't raving lunatics after I see the tremendous pressure that we live our lives under. So that's the first price that we pay for overdoing it. The second price we pay are breakdowns. Breakdowns. Again, not in the sense of the man who's in our text, but what I would really like you to see is that truthfully, there is nothing abnormal about a breakdown. There is nothing wrong with having to stop. Breakdowns are the way that we compensate for the imbalances in our lives. Shutting down once in a while helps us get back to level. Most of us compensate with what I would call a lot of little meltdowns. And I'm about to confess that I'm one of those people. And what I mean by that is times where we have to stop the madness and the craziness and slow down. Now, I know some people resist those little meltdowns and they go in for the big breakdown. And they may need help charting a course away from that when it's all said and done. But that wouldn't be any of us, right? Now, I myself give in to, as surprising as this is going to be to you, a bunch of small momentary breakdowns. Short lapses, I like to call them, if you will, when I simply turn away from whatever I'm working on and I do something that accomplishes absolutely nothing. I like to have moments where I just don't have anything that I have to do, or whatever I do, it helps me to keep my sanity. I think this is a little bit like when you're watching a really serious movie and then all of a sudden there's just that little moment of comic relief. You weren't expecting there to be something funny in the middle of the serious movie. And what does it do? If you're in a movie theater when something like that happens, you can just kind of experience everybody's exhale. And everybody just relaxes for just a moment. And I think we need those kinds of things. They remind me a little bit of the pressure cooker that my mom used to use to can beans with. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Every so often that relief valve would spout off some steam and then everything would go on cooking. And I think sometimes that's what we need. Sometimes for us, this can amount to something as simple as curling up with a good book. At other times, it may mean a quiet walk in 9-degree weather. Yeah. When my kids were younger, and now I still have grandchildren that I can infect with this, one of my favorite diversions was to pester my kids. I know you don't understand that because none of you ever do it. My version of this is I would make up silly songs and sing those songs to them. Yes, silly songs. And I would tackle them. I would tickle them until they were laughing so hard they would beg me to stop. Or the fun part of this is when they expect that, and then I act in just the opposite way because they were expecting it, and I'm not going to give it to them, okay? But for me, this all has an incredibly therapeutic, stress-relieving effect. And I don't know, maybe you're going to pick up on something new that you could do this season that would help you with that. You can call it craziness. You can call it stupidity to excess. But it's just my way of coping, my way of trying to stay sane. So now that we've talked about our part in this, let's talk about what is God's part in all of this. If part of who we are is that we do things to excess and we have our little meltdowns, then the good news for all of us is God's reliability and his steadfastness. God's reliability and his steadfastness. Can I give that to you in just a simple sentence? God never has to break down. Oh, that's great, Pastor. Thank you for giving that to me. That's going to help me get through the season, right? Or at least it's going to help you stay awake for a couple of minutes. God never has to have a breakdown. While it's normal for things like this to happen to us, from a divine point of view, these things don't happen to God. Does that mean that we should never have another breakdown? No. I think you're missing the point if that's where your mind went. The point is we're going to have those breakdowns, but God won't. This is something we need to rely on. The Pharisees in Jesus' day were good examples of people who thought they could be better than everybody else and never have a breakdown. They thought they were above all that. You see, the Pharisees, by the time of Jesus, had become very critical of everybody else's way of living. Do you have one of those little natural critics in your life who just likes to criticize everything you do? Yeah, some of you are going, yeah, I'm not going to point to the person sitting next to me, but yeah, those things happen. And so the Pharisees were critical of everybody, and if you really read through the Gospels carefully, you'll find that Jesus was constantly working to bring them back down to earth. They were too uptight, they were too strict, they were too arrogant, and they were too self-serving. They really thought their way was the only way. They might remind you a little bit of that person in the old-time movies that when they got a pie in the face, everybody cheered. Yeah. You would never do that to somebody like me or anything like that, would you? No. Did that one time in front of my daughter, and she cried when I got a pie in the face. I just wanted you to know that. Because you would probably see me do that, and you would probably say, well, he had it coming. Yeah. Now, my point is there's a little bit of the Pharisees in each one of us. But how reassuring it is to think about the steadiness of God and his ability to stand above every storm that comes our way. In Psalm 89, verse 26, David says to God, "You are my Father, my God, and the rock of my salvation." When we know that God is able to deal with our stuff, and we understand that as long as we stand on his rock, then the floodwaters of life will never reach us. And then we understand that we can live with our own shortcomings. We can live with our own excesses. We can live with our meltdowns. We can be ourselves, but we're going to do it with his protection. Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse 27 says it this way: "The eternal God is your refuge, and his everlasting arms are under you." I love that picture of the arms of God being under us. God is the cure for our imbalance. Isn't that good news? We ought to be pretty happy about that. That's why I talk with you many times about spending time with God and spending time talking to him and having that quiet time. We need the steadying influence of God in our lives. It's very healthy for us to be in the presence of God. So many times we see, honestly, that God is the opposite of the way we are, which makes it all the more important for us to spend time with him. In Samuel Butler's book, The Way of All Flesh, the main character is a young minister named Nicholas who's had a nervous breakdown. In his case, it was because of two very different views of life and religion that he was trying to deal with. He was being pulled in opposite directions. But very interestingly, he goes to see the doctor, and this doctor had a very surprising therapy for this young man. He prescribed for him to go to the zoo and just sit there and watch the elephants. I've never had a prescription written like that before. That would be exciting. The prescription worked. And day after day, the young minister would watch the elephants slowly and methodically pad from side to side in their little arena. Their slow example served to steady him and caused him to understand his own need to slow down. And gradually, as the author writes, balance returned to his life. Here's the point I want you to get. We find our balance in God. God is the cure for the madness in our lives. He is the cure for the excesses in our behavior. He is the balance that helps us keep things level in our lives. As we spend time with God, we find a certain rhythm. We find that he's constantly not changing, and we begin to see that his way of life is best. A movie that I enjoyed so much back in the day was entitled Dead Poet Society. Some of you may remember that Robin Williams movie. There's one scene in it where the class is gathered in the courtyard. And Mr. Keating has given them instructions to walk in a circle. He gives them no instructions about how to do it, but he just wants them to walk in a circle. And it's only a matter of seconds as you watch this that they're all walking in rhythm with each other. What started off as disjointed, now all of a sudden they're doing the same thing together. How much should that be the way that we get close and walk with God? The more time that we spend with God, the closer we get to him, the more we will walk with his rhythm in our lives. So what can we learn from Jesus? There's a couple of things I want you to get here. First of all, there was always a beautiful balance in Jesus' life. Balance is the key. This was the remarkable thing about Jesus. He lived so completely in the presence and the way of God that there was always a beautiful balance to his life. Even when he was confronted with doubters and skeptics and adversity and trouble, he remained calm and steady. Yeah, knock, knock, knock. Got it. Even in the face of torture and death, Jesus' inner strength and purpose burned so brightly. People would remark about it. They would talk about how incredible it is. And maybe that's why, because I don't think we've ever talked about this much. We haven't talked about this much. The soldier at the foot of the cross, when Jesus is being crucified and he's not cussing out everybody that's responsible for this. Do you remember what that soldier said? Surely this was the Son of God. I think he saw the witness of Jesus' life. Now let's be honest, if ever there was a person who had reason to seem worn out and frazzled, it had to be Jesus. He was always on the road to someplace. He was always dealing with crowds. He was always being asked to respond to the needs of others. And he was always under the pressure of enemies trying to trap him. But yet when we read the Gospels, what do we see? We see a man of calm and a man of inner strength. A man who had time for children. A man who always found time for prayer, which leads us to the second lesson that we learn from Jesus, and that is having time for prayer. Jesus always had time for prayer. The pattern of his life was very simple. He would start with prayer, then he would do activity. Then there would be more prayer, and then there would be more activity. How many times do we get that backwards? We start off with activity, and maybe we'll pray about it along the way. Maybe. But Jesus always started with prayer. That's the pattern for Jesus' life. And that pattern always brought to Jesus new life and new energy, especially when he was around people that are broken and hurting. In the story that we looked at in our text of the demon-possessed man to whom Jesus restored balance, Jesus literally puts his life back together. If your imagination goes halfway where my imagination goes, when you hear that he's filled with demons, not just one demon, that would have been story enough, right? But so many demons that they fill up 2,000 pigs. That's incredible. That's incredible. But what happens is Jesus put his life back together. He put the balance back where it needed to be. And the interesting thing was that upon restoring order and balance to his life, the townspeople showed their insanity by begging Jesus to leave the area. That was their response to Jesus doing something incredible. The very person that could have settled their lives, they begged him to leave. It's crazy, isn't it? Here's what I really want you to get from all of this during this Christmas season. We have to rely on God for our balance. So I'm going to say it again. It's not abnormal to have a breakdown. Maybe not like the guy in the text, but it's not wrong to have your world turned upside down and for you to take some time to get away from it all. What Christmas was really intended to teach us is that God is the secret at the heart of human success. Think about that. God is the secret at the heart of human success. God is the unchanging one who invites us to pattern our life's rhythm after his. If you do that, if you get exhausted from your preparations this season, if the stresses are too much for you, then I have good news for you. God is dependable and God is eternal. If you and I can come regularly into his presence the same way that maybe you would get up in the morning and go out and enjoy a beautiful sunrise, if we would start looking at life that way every time God does something incredible in our lives, I think we could build the balance of God back into our lives. Now, one more thought from this text. When the man in the scripture had been cured of his breakdown, he was so excited about Jesus that he wanted to follow Jesus everywhere. When they get in the boat to leave, he comes down, he wants to get in the boat and go with them. But Jesus said no. One of the few times when Jesus says no to somebody who wants to follow after him. Jesus told him to go back to his own people and be a witness there. Go back and tell those people everything that happened to you and everything that's happening in your life. What Jesus is saying is, I want you to let them see the sanity that is in you, because that testifies to the goodness of God. Sometimes we get tempted, as I think this man was, to make a lifetime out of one experience. It wasn't just enough that he was healed. having found salvation, sometimes we want to overdo that and we want to get away from life as we know it and life as we have it here. And we really don't want to stop. But the witness of Jesus is that we should not want to get away. That we are to live out our humanity right here, right where we are. There's an old song that used these words, "Let the beauty of Jesus be seen in me." Powerful song. So like the formerly demon-possessed man, when God does something incredible in our lives, we are to return to those lives. The life that is always threatened by imbalances and breakdowns and meltdowns. That's going to be our lot in life. Maybe you thought I was going to give you a cure-all for all this today, but I don't have one. I can just point you to Jesus. So we return to our lives knowing the name that is able to send our demons packing. We return to our lives knowing the one in whose presence we can find real peace. Have you figured out yet how this ties into the Christmas story? Luke chapter 2, verses 13 and 14. I want you to see what we're told is coming. Suddenly, the angel of the Lord was joined by a vast host of others, the armies of heaven, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in highest heaven, and peace to those with whom God is pleased." That's my wish for you today, that you would have the peace of God, because God is pleased with the fact that you're trusting in him. Would you stand with me, please, for our prayer?